How to identify a narcissist from a conversation. Subtle conversational red flags that expose a narcissist. Do you sometimes get the sense someone is extremely self-absorbed but can't pinpoint why? Narcissists reveal themselves through certain discussion habits and reactions. In this video, we'll explore over 20 subtle conversational red flags that signal narcissism, based on the answers given by narcissists. Like anger or manipulation when told no, bragging and entitlement in how they describe themselves, immature defenses to criticism, externalizing blame for failures or rejection, frequent interruptions and topic hijacking, basking in compliments excessively, inability to discuss others more than themselves, gossiping and smearing reputations, vague conclusions after venting, contradictory claims over time, lack of empathy, harsh judgment toward those who struggle, making excuses versus taking responsibility, arrogance toward inferior people, bending rules freely for themselves, ulterior motives behind favors, blaming exes for relationship failures. You'll learn what healthy communication looks like versus narcissistic patterns. Mastering these techniques allows you to spot narcissists through their everyday discussions and responses. Let's uncover the manipulative tactics they use to dominate conversations and control narratives. 1. Say no and watch their reaction. One simple but powerful technique is to say no to a request and closely observe their reaction. This reveals their sense of entitlement and ability to handle rejection. For example, firmly decline an invitation, favor, or loan. Politely state your boundary without guilt. A reasonable person may feel slightly disappointed but will respect your right to say no. They'll courteously state it's no problem and move on. However, a narcissist is likely to get huffy or angry at being told no. They hate rejection and may try to manipulate you to change your decision. For instance, what do you mean no? I was only trying to do something nice. Don't you trust me? Come on, I'd do it for you. Why are you being so difficult? I can't believe you won't help me when I need it. Some friend you are. See if they attempt to override your no by shaming or guilting you. This reveals an inflated sense of entitlement where your needs don't matter. Their reaction offers a wealth of data. A respectful communicator takes no for an answer the first time. 2. Observe how they speak about themselves. It's also very telling to note how they describe themselves in everyday discussion. Do they constantly fish for compliments? For example, aren't these new shoes just amazing? Everyone kept stopping me to ask where I got them. Do they flaunt status symbols and name drop? For example, as I was telling my good friend, insert celebrity name, you really must vacation in the Hamptons. Do they act like rules don't apply to them? For instance, that no parking sign is more of a loose suggestion than an actual rule. Do they come across as entitled and superior? For example, I always let myself cut lines. I don't have time to wait like these people. Pay close attention to how positively versus humbly they portray themselves. Subtle, boastful comments reveal deeper narcissism brewing under the surface. 3. Notice how they handle criticism. It's also very telling how someone responds to constructive feedback or criticism. This reveals a lot about their confidence level and self-awareness. A well-adjusted person may feel annoyed at first, but will calmly consider if there are any kernels of truth to learn from. For instance, you make a fair point about me missing deadlines lately. I should work on my time management skills. Or, I didn't realize how often I interrupt people. Thank you for bringing that to my attention kindly. I'll be more mindful. But a narcissist either rages in response to criticism or pretends it doesn't bother them at all. For example, how dare you attack me? I've gotten results for the past 10 years. Or, your opinion means nothing to me. You don't know what you're talking about. See if they lash out when corrected or talked to about problematic behavior. Immature defenses like these reveal extreme defensiveness. 4. Notice how they handle failure or rejection. You can also learn a lot from how they handle failure or rejection. This probes their resilience and locus of control. Do they process disappointments maturely? For example, I'm bummed I didn't get the job, but I'll learn from the experience and keep trying. Or do they freak out and rapidly shift blame outward? For example, "It's ridiculous I wasn't chosen. The interviewer clearly had it out for me." See if they can discuss failures calmly or if it provokes character attacks on others. Blaming reveals an inability to accept personal responsibility. Likewise, watch how they describe past rejection in relationships or social circles. Do they discuss it objectively or make their exes out to be villains? Mature processing of setbacks demonstrates self-confidence and critical thinking, but narcissists perceive failure as threats to their facade that send them into a tailspin. 5. Notice how much they interrupt others. Also make note of how often they interrupt other people while conversing. We all excitedly interject now and then, but frequent interrupting reveals self-focus and lack of empathy. For instance, do they hijack the flow to switch topics to themselves? Do they barge into others, sharing experiences to one-up them? Are group discussions dominated by their voice because they can't stand the spotlight off them? These patterns show little care for others' experiences or perspectives. They value others only as a captive audience for their monologues. Don't let good listening skills or witty banter fool you. If they skillfully commandeer the conversation back to themselves, that's a narcissistic red flag. 6. Observe how long they'll listen before interrupting again. Here's a simple litmus test. When they do stay quiet for once, time how long they'll listen before interrupting again. Can they actively listen without making the conversation about them again? Or do they rapidly steer it back to themselves? A mentally healthy communicator may pipe in to connect or express empathy. For example, "Thanks for sharing that story. I know how meaningful your generosity was to them." But a narcissist will switch topics back to themselves without acknowledging what you said. For example, "That reminds me of when I helped my neighbor." See if they can go 5+ minutes focusing on you versus their instinct kicking in to make it about them again almost instantly. 7. Watch how they receive compliments. Pay close attention as well to how they receive compliments and praise. This reveals a lot about their confidence level. A well-grounded person feels flattered, but also deflects praise onto others' roles. For example, "Thanks. I'm proud of how the event turned out. It was a total team effort." But a narcissist interprets every compliment purely as confirmation of their superiority. For instance, "I know I organized everything perfectly from start to finish today." They believe the spotlight is permanently meant to shine on them. They accept praise as expected tribute, rather than with sincere gratitude. 8. See if they can discuss others more than themselves. Here's another simple litmus test. When conversing, do they manage to speak about others more than themselves? For example, if you describe a challenge at work, can they express understanding and discuss how to help you? Or do they instantly flip the topic to vent about their own workload instead? If you open up about a goal you're pursuing, can they stay focused on you for a full conversation? Or do they redirect back to their own journey within minutes? A caring person will expend mental energy trying to understand your perspective without making it about them. A narcissist simply cannot. 9. Notice if they gossip or smear reputations. It's also very telling if someone gossips frequently or smears people's reputations. A little venting now and then is normal, but narcissists thrive on maligning people who threaten their superiority or didn't cater sufficiently to their needs. For instance, beware if they constantly criticize people behind their backs, share private information to sabotage others' reputations, label anyone who held them accountable as toxic or crazy, spread exaggerated rumors to destroy rivals' status. Gossiping equates judging others' flaws. It's attempts to bond with you over putting others down. Of course, venting is human, but consistent trashing of people in their absence is a bright red flag, especially combined with other narcissistic habits. 10. Notice how they wrap up stories about themselves. Here's a very sneaky tell. When they finish recounting stories or venting about something, listen carefully to how they wrap it up. Do they describe what they learned from the experience and how they grew? For example, so even though my injury derailed me, I realized I could focus on another dream in the meantime. It taught me resilience. Or do they finish their monologues focused solely on the distress it caused them? For example, I still can't believe they promoted her instead of me after everything I contributed. Self-absorbed people get stuck ruminating on their own victimhood. More evolved communicators find the silver linings and self-improvement angles. 11. Notice if they make contradictory claims. Keep an ear out as well for contradictory claims they state confidently at different times. For instance, perhaps they painted their ex as negligent and absent early on, but later they might describe them as overly controlling instead. Which is it? The inconsistencies reveal they distort narratives about people and events to suit their agenda in the moment. In contrast, an honest person can explain shifts in their perspective over time. For example, at first I saw my ex's constant texting as needy, but later I realized it actually came from a place of anxiety, not attachment. But a narcissist shape-shifts descriptions about others fluidly. They manipulate facts freely without explanation or accountability. 12. Observe their empathy levels in conversations. It's also very telling to watch if they display empathy during deeper conversations. For example, if you open up about grief over losing a loved one, do they express compassion, or do they ignore your sadness and start venting about their own life instead? If you tell them you got passed over for a promotion, do they commiserate, or do they instantly make it about their own job and insecurities? Narcissists may pretend to care through robotic sympathy, but they'll quickly steer the focus back to themselves. They are too self-absorbed to extend non-superficial emotional energy to others. Their egos squash genuine compassion. 13. Notice if they judge harshly without mercy. Here's another red flag, a tendency to judge others harshly without mercy. For example, do they label someone as worthless for a single mistake? Do they rant about how despicable it is for people to struggle with issues like addiction or debt? Are they unforgiving about others making errors or having a tough time? A degree of situational judgment is normal, but flippantly condemning people reveals lack of empathy and humility. As the saying goes, judge yourself before judging others. Mentally healthy people know we've all made poor choices in desperate moments. A narcissist does not. 14. Notice if they take responsibility or make excuses. It's also very telling how someone explains negative events. Do they take personal responsibility or make excuses and blame others? For example, I didn't get the account because my proposal was mediocre. I have no one to blame but myself. Or, the client clearly can't understand value. That's why they didn't accept my perfect proposal. How people explain failures and setbacks offers deep insight into their character. Narcissists have a pathological need to uphold a spotless image of superiority at all times, so they reflexively push blame outward onto supposedly inferior people or unfair circumstances. In contrast, the emotionally strong can look within and own their part in disappointments without shattering their self-worth. Accountability demonstrates security. 15. Listen for arrogance toward inferiors. Also, watch out for arrogance toward people they deem inferior, such as service staff, assistants, students, etc. For example, do they speak condescendingly about the waiter taking too long with their order? Do they get impatient quickly with the customer service rep struggling to help them? Superiority bias reveals they categorize other people as either equals or those unworthy of basic respect. This aligns with narcissism's hierarchical worldview. The narcissist overvalues themselves and undervalues those they perceive lower on the status totem pole. 16. Notice if they think rules don't apply to them. It's also telling to watch if they excuse themselves from rules and standards. For example, claiming extra vacation time won't hurt anyone, using connections to skip lines because they're too important. speeding because they won't actually get pulled over. We all cut corners occasionally, but frequently bending rules for personal gain signals entitlement and arrogance. They believe social norms are for other people, not important ones like themselves. This root belief sprouts all types of ongoing manipulation and deceit. 17. See if they admire or criticize modest living. It's also very telling how someone responds to simple or modest living. For instance, if you know someone living within their means to escape the rat race, off the grid to pursue art, writing, etc. Does the narcissist express admiration for their principles and grit to break you from convention? For example, I really admire how brave she was to leave a stable job to farm and create art. She's boldly seizing life on her own terms. Or do they criticize alternative lifestyles, implying foolishness or failure? For example, he couldn't hack it in the real world, so he ran away to live like a hippie. I could never settle for some tent in the wilderness. One elevates freedom and fulfillment, the other solely equates status with tangible achievement and wealth. 18. See if they offer favors with ulterior motives. It's also very telling to watch if someone offers favors with unspoken strings attached. For example, doing something you didn't request, then expecting extensive gratitude for it. Giving lavish gifts early on in relationships that make you feel beholden. Constantly talking about money they spent on you or time invested as implicit leverage. Genuine kindness comes no strings attached, but narcissists use generosity to obligate others and feed their egos. If giving back seems to revolve around praising and flattering them, it's likely calculated self-interest rather than authentic goodwill. 19. Notice how often they reference relationships ending poorly. It's also very telling if someone describes most past relationships ending mysteriously or dramatically. For example, she changed after the wedding and soon became a different person altogether. He just ghosted me out of the blue one day without explanation. Narcissists often have a track record of people cutting them off or wanting to escape their manipulation after the love-bombing phase wears off. Of course, many kind people have been unlucky in love too, but if all their exes supposedly turned crazy, the narcissist is likely the recurring common denominator. 20. Watch their reactions when you forget details about them. Here's one more sneaky technique. Say you accidentally forget an unimportant detail about them they told you in the past. Does the narcissist dismiss it graciously? For example, no worries. I know I've told you a ton about my marathon training. Or do they get huffy or guilt trip you? For example, wow, really? After all my updates on this, you don't remember I switched trainers? Being forgotten in any capacity injures a narcissist's grandiose ego. It communicates they didn't impress you as profoundly as they expect. A balanced person understands memory lapses happen with smaller details, especially when stressed. But even mild inattention threatens the narcissist's sense of importance. The more red flags you notice, the clearer the pattern becomes. An occasional slip-up doesn't necessarily indicate full narcissism. But increased problematic communication signals someone is likely self-absorbed and manipulative. Mastering these tells allows you to detect narcissists through their everyday interactions. You'll learn to listen between the lines and notice what they don't say. Their discussions and reactions reveal the narcissist hiding behind their polished veneer. Please share any other techniques you find effective for spotting these conversational red flags.